This week's episode is brought to you by Rackspace. Did you know that Rackspace can help guide your migration to Amazon Web Services? Rackspace support for AWS offers tooling and automation for account management, security, and best practices. Learn more at rackspace.com/yourcloud.
Welcome to Still Untitled, the Adam Savage Project. I'm Will.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Roman.
Roman Mars, welcome. Wow.
If you don't know Roman, then you are not listening to the right podcast. You should turn off our podcast right now. Go to 99%invisible.org.com.
99pi.org.
99pi.org and download the latest. It doesn't matter which episode you download because they're
matter.
all awesome.
And let's just be clear, while we record about 50 of these podcasts per year, Roman produces about 50 some odd of his podcasts per year, but it is a fully produced magazine style fucking
it's a show.
Radio show.
Like ours is just three dudes
we show
sitting
up
around
and
talking.
shoot the breeze once a week,
Yeah.
and it's pretty simple and straightforward. You take you told me 8 weeks to produce a story?
I would say 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's with a staff and everything.
Right,
Like,
right.
It takes a long time.
And so you guys have it's a bunch of people there now. When you started, it was just you and a couple of people, right?
No, it was just me. It was just
Wow.
me at night, and it was like my 5th job in radio. And I started it, and it was like a little drop-in that we put on KALW in Morning Edition about like local architecture or something like that. And then it found a life online when, it just found a group of people who found like podcasted, loved it. And then as we fundraised for it and added a little bit more, we added one person, and now we have 9.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the first time I heard about 99PI was talking to people who were at like the podcast aficionados section at the first XOXO festival in Portland. And Glenn Fleischman was like, hey, I know what kind of stuff you like. You should listen to this podcast. It's going to really blow your mind.
Yeah.
And as I was on the plane home, I downloaded a couple episodes, and I ran out of the second episode before the plane got back to San Francisco. I was like, I just have to go, and I went all the way. Like
So
every
you had a
episode is
driveway
great.
moment with a podcast.
I totally, but I was on an airplane with go-go, so there was no internet. There was no
moment.
continuing that. It was a dark time for me. But
Do you know every time on a plane when I'm using that really, really terrible internet, I write Greenberg-style letters to GoGo Wireless in my head. Dear GoGo, I would like a refund for my recent Delta flight from New York to San Francisco.
So every time I think about bitching about that, the crappy internet Wi-Fi on the airplane,
think of Louis C.K.
I think of Louis C.K. Right? I am a self-entitled asshole, but I'm not enough of a self-entitled asshole to do what Louis said not to do. So I'm gonna, Anyway,
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
So like 10 people. You guys have done 400 episodes ish, 300 and something.
No, it'll be 236.
Just 236. Oh, it's still incredible, and they're all good. Is the thing. That's the thing that blows my mind consistently. Every week is better than the one before.
Well, that's
and
nice to hear.
It
doesn't feel that way when we're making it, but I think when I look over the total like body of work, I'm like super proud of the show. Like I really like the show.
Have you seen obviously you must have seen a progression in producing style and the kind of narratives and the construction of those narratives over time. What have been some of the most significant changes?
I mean, the main thing is with the addition of other people and their perspectives, like there's still me hosting the show, but the voice of all the reporters who are characters on the show and the way that they write and edit the pieces in these ways that I just wouldn't come up with. It's great to hire people who are better than you at things, and they're all really fantastic radio makers. And so the stories have gotten more complex. They've gotten more interesting. I used to be content to cover a topic in a kind of cursorial kind of way and just like, here's Desire Pass, and we just talk about Desire Pass, and it doesn't really have a story. And now everything is really grounded in a concrete story, and it resonates in a bigger way. And then we've done experiments. Like a couple weeks ago, we released a piece that was written by John Mooallem and scored by members of the Decemberists, and we did it live on stage. And it's kind of this epic thing that I was not capable of doing until we had funds to do it, and until we had like enough of an audience to make it worth those people's time to like, work on my podcast,
Right.
Yeah.
and
That's for exposure, man.
and so
This little show at Cafe de Nord.
and so that type of stuff is just like it's bigger in every way, and it's still really fun to work on. But
How long is the list of shows you still are like dying to sink your teeth into, like ideas? How far ahead are you with solid show ideas?
I mean, solid show ideas, I'd say, we know, because the cycle being 6 to 8 weeks, we kind of know 6 to 8 weeks
Right.
ahead, obviously. When it comes to me and my interests, now I have to convince them of things that I'm interested in. It used to be just like, I want to do Zeppelins. Let's just do something on Zeppelins, and now they'll go, well, what's the story? So my things, there's lots of little things. So I kind of keep an ongoing tally of, like topics or ideas, and I read a lot of books, and I, keep tabs on it all. And maybe in a year or two, enough different pieces will come together where obviously then it forms enough of a thesis and a story for it to
Right.
be a thing.
So it's to group under a single rubric.
Exactly. It's really, it like no idea gets completely killed or lost. They always kind of stay. One of my ones that lasted forever is about flags. I'm really interested in flags and flag design.
Your flag talk is just one of my favorite things in the world.
You did it at our tested show the first
I
year.
did.
Yeah.
I did.
Mhm.
I did like a short version of
Yeah.
the tested show, and then I did a big version for TED TED.com, and then but that was one that came to me when I was, I was just in Chicago thinking about it, trying to figure out how I was going to do this as a story, and then I guess maybe 6 years later it became a thing.
Wow.
And then it became like lots of different iterations on that thing.
Yeah.
So it's pretty common for me to have these types of ideas for forever and not, and just kind of not know where to put them.
I have to imagine your potpourri file is one of the more interesting, like,
Yeah.
like what's in the grab bag, and I mean, how much of it is you trying to wedge that stuff into beat the ideas into shape and get them into the thing, and how much of it is it just kind of when the time is right you realize, oh right, this is back in the file, I can pull this out and we'll go back in and add this into this episode, it'll give it a little more resonance.
It tends to be more of the latter, mainly because a lot of my job now is supporting the 9 people who work for me, and my job is more of a business person
Right.
than it ever has been before.
What always happens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like if we want to get a story done, if I want to get a story done, we assign it to a producer. And if it's my story to get done, it'll get done like in 8 months.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of it. So now if I have something that I'm really dying to talk about or do, it'll be it'll be nice to get a little thing in there and figure out how it fits into somebody else's thing. I mean, right now we've been trying these this new format of the show where we, in fact, I'm producing it right now. That's going to release on Tuesday. Is you should do a story, which is when people like tweet at me about a thing or whatever, and we do little 2 or 3 minute things where I just like interview an expert or something, and we nest them together, and it's a way to sort of get some of those out of my system that I really, really enjoy, but maybe they don't warrant a full story because there's not a character to follow. It's not really 20 minutes worth of a story. It's just a kind of an idea or a concept.
Okay.
And so
I've got a story for you.
okay.
Okay. I already tried this. When Norm and I went there, I pitched the little guys on the back of the families, the sticker
Oh
families.
yeah.
Oh, that's actually a good little short story.
Oh,
I should
okay.
figure that out.
Baby on board versus all lives matter,
Well,
that kind of thing.
I'm thinking specifically of the ones that are like the caricatures.
Oh, right, the
parents and the kid and the
Yeah.
dog and the
Yeah.
Jedi and the Jesus or whatever people put on their backs of their cars.
A friend of mine once had a date go sour.
Oh no!
Have I told this on the podcast?
I don't think
He had
so.
a date go sour because he had been wanting to date this girl for a while. She was really lovely, and he picks her up at her house, and she gets into his car, and they pull up into traffic, and they're behind a car which has an ichthyes on the back, the Christian fish.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this one has little legs because it's the fish walking out of the
Darwin
ocean, and it
fish,
says
yeah.
Darwin in it. And she goes, "Oh, look, that's really cute. It's a turtle that says Darwin." And my friend goes, Do I correct my date? I don't want to neg her. This is not what I do, but I feel
actually.
the need to correct. And so he said, This is not a Freudian slip. This did not happen to me. He says, it's not a turtle. It's a fish with legs. It's walking on it. No, she says, it's a turtle. And he hits a wall. She absolutely will not listen to his explanation and not agree with him whatsoever.
I don't know which side of this conversation I'm on, but I think we should just move on.
Okay, so that's not my pitch. My pitch is I cleared this pool table off that's on the other side of us here recently, and my sons and I have been playing lots and lots of pool, and it's reminded me of, as I've been instructing them about pool, and they've both, of course, picked it up on a much deeper level than I had at their age, and it's really lovely to hear them talk about pool with the correct language. And one of my sons plays a really deep and hearty defense, which I appreciate, because a lot of people don't think of defense as a playing mode of playing pool and billiards.
Right.
But it's critical if you are going to play seriously. You've got to, if you don't have a shot, you can choose to make a shot that will make your opponent's life a living hell. And it requires fine ball control and real strategy. And one of my sons is really good at it. But one of the things I had to tell him was, don't ever try that in a bar. You never play defense in a bar. And it cascaded this whole set. There's a whole different set of rules for playing pool in bars. Because if you are good and you're going to go in and you're going to hold the table, eventually someone will offer you a bar fight. It'll sound, it won't be as polite as I've phrased it. But I mean, I remember being 23 at the Albion on 16th Street and holding the table all night long and getting offered a couple of different bar fights. And at one point during a critical game on the second to last shot, I wasn't on the 8-ball, but I was on my last ball and I didn't have a shot, and I played a safety, and the entire bar turned against me. So that if I had gotten my ass kicked, no one would have jumped to my defense. And then I was out drinking with a friend of mine who's Irish recently, and I was saying, I came across this Reddit thread about, quote, buying rounds in Ireland. Do you know about this?
No.
So if
I know it, yeah.
If you're in Ireland and you're like hanging out with friends, one of them goes, I'll get a round. And he goes up and he brings back beers for everybody. Now, you are now on the hook to procure a round for everybody. And as these rounds progress, everyone in Ireland has the part of their brain allocated so that they can keep track of who's good and who's not. And woe betide the person who somehow stiffs the room on one of the rounds. So there's this great social pressure on you to maintain the position within the rounds. And sometimes you can be lined up like 3 drinks ahead because people keep buying rounds as they finish, even if everyone else isn't finished.
It's an incredible amount of drinking pressure.
Right. And so this led to me thinking about the secret rules inside of bars.
Because you guys did an episode. So I don't think I said this at the beginning, but 99% Invisible is a podcast about design.
Yeah.
In kind of all aspects of the world.
In a very broad sense. Yeah.
And you did an episode about the design of basketball rules, of the game of basketball.
That's right. We did a couple.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And made me understand the game as it's played now.
I haven't heard this one.
Oh, it makes, when you're watching the NBA Finals and you're watching the Warriors just shoot 3-point after 3-point after 3-point after 3-point, you realize we're in another one of the kind of turning point situations where there's got to be some sort of change in the game. And you talked about it in relation to the dunk, to the invention of the dunk is the one I'm thinking about.
Exactly.
So I don't mean to dredge up something from like 2 years ago.
No. It is shocking how much I forget about the shows that I work on. But that one we did with ESPN worked on it. But it had to do with the fact that, once people began to learn to dunk, they had to build into the design of the game an outside pressure to not go in and dunk all the time. And that was the invention of the 3-point shot. And now that there are teams like the Warriors who really excel at the 3-point shot, there might be this pressure to change it back, or that might be just, a lot of people think that it's just an anomaly and, Curry's just
it's just
an outlier changing the entire structure.
And so therefore it's not worthy of a game, of a change of the game. We also did one on the shot clock, which is like, there was a period of time where, like, speaking of defensive play, where a big part of your game was that you just didn't go in and shoot the ball and you ran out the clock as you were leading, and finals would end like 17-18. There would be like final games like of like the early professional leagues, until finally they did some math and they were like, like to score 80 points on each team, they multiply that times the number of minutes, and you have 20, and it comes down to getting 24 seconds to get a shot to get the right number of turn that you would need. And so they just put it in the game and made it part of the thing. And so I love those little game design tweaks to make something better.
Billiards has undergone the same thing multiple times in its history. In around the turn of the 19th to 20th century, billiards was undergoing the same kind of boom that it underwent after Color of Money came out in the 80s.
Okay. That makes sense.
The big game back then was carom billiards. It was a pocketless table. There were 3 balls on the table, two red and 1 white, and your goal was to hit a cushion and both other balls,
right,
in each shot. And the problem with it was, I believe Willie Hoppy was the first giant world-beating star. He became so good, he could just make the first shot, and in a game to 150 points, he could just run out 150 double caroms in a row. And there were I have a book from 1880 that describes one of his methods of just you get 2 balls near the bank and you just keep on doing this sort of like almost braiding of the balls, and that led to the elimination of single carom billiards to what's called 3 cushion billiards, in which you have to, with one of the 3 balls on the table, hit 3 cushions and both other balls in any order you want, as long as a ball hit is the last thing that happens. So it can be 3 cushions and then you hit both balls, or 2 cushions and then 1 ball and then a 3rd cushion and the 2nd ball. It's so difficult. The greatest player in the world has a per turn point average of less than 2.
Wow.
Like the greatest run ever is something like 9 points in a row or 11 points in a row, and that's the best anyone has ever done.
Wow.
But it was the same thing, because people were like, they were exhausted. They'd show up and they were exhausted to watch this. And it's why 9-ball eventually overtook straight pool. In straight pool, you just keep shooting racks until someone has 150 points.
It's amazing that this never happened for cricket.
I still don't understand cricket at all. I know there's a ball and a bat and a whole bunch of people, but the rest of the game.
I learned it from hitchhikers. You have to knock the wickets down if you're on one team, and then you run back and forth. And sometimes it goes for like 3 days, but they take time off at night. It's not like baseball where they just keep playing until somebody falls over dead. I can't believe that Norm left for a week, and we're talking about sports when Roman's here. So this is an unexpected
What, is it
turn.
sports not a norm?
No, Norm's actually the sportsiest of the 3 of us.
Oh, he is? Okay.
Yeah, he's a basketball and baseball fan.
I hadn't the slightest idea.
Yeah, and anyway, they're going to let us know. We were going to talk about parenting stuff a little bit.
Let's talk about parenting, because Roman has twin boys.
I do.
Famous from the tail end of the show.
Yeah, they're in the tail end of the show. Well, they used to be. They were part of the ads. Yeah.
And they're 10 years old.
They're 10 years old now. Yeah.
I also have twin boys. They are 18 years old.
I cannot imagine what is going to happen between 10 and 18 right now.
As you have probably already found, every age is better than its predecessor. As the kids grow, it just gets more and more invigorating and exciting. And we were talking a couple of weeks ago about how, like, before you have kids, I had this fantasy of standing on a corner with a little kid of mine holding my hand with his little fingers. And I'm here to tell you that the reality of that was every bit as good as I was hoping it would be, right? It was like... And
Absolutely.
at 18, I find they're amazing to deal with. They are lovely humans. And it's the easiest from a temporal level, but the decision trees are Gordian.
Well, so my daughter's 4.5 now, and she's just getting to the point that her risk management is commensurate with her skill level. Like she will, if there is a balance beam, it doesn't matter if it's 10 feet off the ground or 6 inches off the ground. She is going to go for it. Right?
Wow.
No fear at all.
So
of heights
you're
and stuff
raising
like
a
that.
parkour master.
I mean, it's the anyway. That's a whole different problem. But yeah, so she's now looking at that and she says, "Dad, that one might be a little bit high. Will you stand underneath me?"
What's so I can cushion you with my bulk when you fall?
I mean, you get good at catching. It turns out you're like, okay, it's a weird calculus problem where you have to get in under the armpits and you're good. But I have to imagine that like there's another peak for that somewhere between where you are, Roman, and where you are, where like the risk management and the ability to get into trouble, like that curve gets real out of whack.
You know, at this, Yeah, it's all about preparing your kid to survive.
Right.
It's all about giving them the skills to be a functional human. I, having raised my kids in relative comfort in an expensive city, am terrified that I will leave them unprepared for the realities of like paying rent and being a reasonable person to live with. My son, one of my sons, is on his way to Los Angeles this summer to spend a year working at a job as a gap year before going to college. And he was like, I think I'd like to get a studio apartment. And I'm like, nope, you're going to live with people because you should learn how awful you are to live with strangers before you subject it on someone who you actually like.
Yeah, roommates are important.
Roommates are vital for working that stuff out before you move in with some girl you think is awesome and finding out that she cannot deal.
Or even before you go to college and like have to have somebody that you're stuck with for a year and you can't get out. Yeah,
and now it feels
important.
at this very moment in time, I am. Well, first of all, at around 15, 16, the whole Oedipal thing is totally real. They just start killing you every single day. And it's in the way that they start telling you, like, Dad's uncool, or they're like, no, we've heard this story, idiot.
My dad wears a fedora.
They like to tell me, Dad, you have the musical taste of a 14-year-old girl.
That's actually a compliment.
I think that's pretty good.
I mean,
I'm
look,
like, hey, sometimes you have to give it up. Justin Bieber can sing a great song occasionally.
there is nothing wrong with Taylor Swift's 1989 album. That is one of the greatest pop albums of the last 10 years.
Totally agree with that. And my wife had to take me aside at one point. This was about 3 years ago. The boys were 15. And she said, sweetie, I know you think you're taking your boys growing older and usurping you well, but I'm here to tell you you're not taking it as well as you think you're taking it. It's time to scale back the discipline and the response you have to them when they talk back to you.
Oh, I see. Yeah, right now my boys are in this really great area where they're into things I'm into, and we're into things for the same reasons.
Yeah.
It's not me like liking the references in the Pixar movie and they're just liking the basic story of the Pixar movie. We all like the same things for the same reasons, and when they get jokes, I get really excited when they get kind of more adult jokes.
Yeah.
But they're also still cuddly, and they like to like we have a ritual where I touch all their bones before they go to bed. Like we do back tickling, and that's what we call it. And I love this area.
Yeah.
And I really hope that at least part of it, because so much of my well-being is tied up in my affection with them.
Yeah.
And I'm really worried about that going away. I know it's going to go away. But
my boys are still quite affectionate. They're huggers.
Good.
But I think I told this recently on the podcast. When one of my sons, thing one, was 11, he came upstairs from a nightmare and asked to sleep in our bed, and I was like, at 11, they're sweaty, and, they actually are starting to stink, and I was like, and I almost said no, and I realized, you know what, this is the last time. This is so come on in, and it was the last time either of them ever slept in my bed, and I'm. I was glad because the last diaper should come with a party that rivals my 50th birthday party, right? The last diaper should have fanfare and a parade, but it doesn't, because there's always some literal shitstorm later on after you think you've changed the last diaper.
Man, we celebrated the last one. We got girls are easy on toilet training, I think. But
really?
Yeah, we made a big deal. She was like, I don't want to wear diapers anymore, and then that was it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Decision.
See, one of my sons kept on having these really, to call them skid marks would really not do them justice. They were more like off-roading.
Oh, gross.
And we were
Enjoy your
like,
breakfast,
what's
folks."
going on? And he recently revealed to me, he's like, yeah, when I was 11 and 12, I thought that wiping your butt was a scam. He thought that we were part of some conspiracy, and he wasn't buying into it.
So I get
We kept having to throw out underpants.
I'm in the situation now where you feel like she will feign full understanding of everything that you say at this point. It's like, oh yeah, Dad, I understand that. You told me that before. And then I'm like, I think about all the things that I didn't understand, but I thought I did. All from birth until age 42 where I am now, which is, I mean, that's multiple volumes that are really substantial. And I wonder, like, my favorite game now is trying to suss out what she thinks she understands and has just completely wrong and fundamental misunderstandings of the core being a thing. And of course, as I'm doing this, I can't think of one off the top of my head because it's a great place for an example.
Well, so last night I had my wife and I had a difficult interaction with one of my sons. We were upset with him and he was upset with us, and to cool down, I actually left the house and came over here to the shop to just kind of like glue something together and kind of get my headspace. And he ended up doing exactly the same thing. His mom, my ex-wife, lives just a few blocks from our house. And he just went over there to do a little bit of work and kind of get into his headspace. And I called him. I heard that he had done that, and I called him and said, "You all right?" He said, "Yeah, I'm all right." And I said, "All right, you don't want to come over here and talk it through?" Or no, I kind of feel okay about this. And then about 20 minutes later, he texted me and said, "Do you want to have dinner?" And so I took him out to dinner, and that was to me, it felt like a harbinger of the future, right? Of like meeting up with my sons in other cities where they live and have productive lives and taking them to, like, nothing makes me more excited than that moment of like meeting them as adults and meeting them on that level. And there was a bit of that last night. It was absolutely delightful.
Yeah. That's nice. I'm that's one of the things that keeps me, the things that gets me the saddest, like just existentially saddest, is thinking about them as adults and wanting to know them and wanting to meet them, and the fear of not being able to know them or meet them is like a really big, like deep-seated fear in me. But it has to do with that. Like, I want to know what men they become, because right now I really dig them. Like they're good boys, you know. But they have the exact same issue right now that I'm trying to squash out of them, which is they're becoming actually kids, and in a way that I'm nervous about for them, where they, where they are experts of things that they have no idea what they're talking about, and I'm telling them that you learn more by listening than by talking, and you need, like this sort of thing. And it's been a thing that we really struggle over, because they work things out. My kids chat, like talk, like constantly talk. The reason they were on the show is because the people who wanted the advertise on the end of the podcast, their tagline was email for people with something to say, and I was like, well, my kids always have something to say. This is back when they were 4 years old, and they just constantly just chatter, and so we just use snippets of them on the end of the show, and they're still that way. They just they work stuff out by constantly talking, and my big worry for them is that they're not listening to people and not taking stuff in and not recognizing that they don't know everything.
Well, it's a hard skill.
Yeah. It is, especially for people with jobs in which they learn a lot quickly and talk eruditely about the things they know. I am a recovering mansplainer. I have been guilty of being a blowhard. My friends now go, "Oh, he's going into the actually voice." And one of my sons, Thing 2, has exhibited this with such alacrity that there have been evenings when he's holding court and my wife gets mad at me.
My note,
like intergenerational blame.
Exactly. You taught this to him.
Your fault, savage.
I am looking at you at this table.
In 6th grade, the note at the end of my year-end report card, my mom saved it and put it in a frame on the wall so I would never forget. But it was Miss Stickley, who was my favorite teacher that year, basically said, "Will is an incredible student. I have to be careful that he won't teach the other students things that are not true." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't really understand that one for a good 15 years after that, probably." But yeah.
I had my fifth grade teacher, Miss Levine, gave me a comic from the New Yorker at the time of a little boy going like this, and the teacher is saying, "Harold, just because you can do the work doesn't mean you don't have to." It took me several years to understand what she meant by that.
Well, it's interesting. Like, it's interesting being in that situation, right? Because I was definitely that kid, and like I figured that out the really hard way by just getting beaten down over and over and over again by people smarter than me, and I don't know what, like, I don't know how look, my kid's 4. I have time to figure it out. I mean, that's the good news, I guess, is when you're talking to somebody who has kids older than you, there's always, like, the difficulty ramps up with the time that you have before you get to that portion.
I was texting back and forth with Drew Curtis from FARC, who's a friend, and he's got a bunch of kids, and we were talking about one of my kids, and I was like, he'll be fine. I just have to kick his ass a bunch until he's an adult. And Drew said, that is the greatest single phrase for parenting I've heard.
It's a very 50s approach.
It feels like that sometimes. Like, you just have to just keep on putting the right amount of loving pressure on them. I don't know. At this point, like I said, I feel like I'm just imparting the last bits of nuggets of goodness. Here, take this and try it out.
Yeah.
But it's also really clear there was this turn. Like, so my son is officially graduating on Wednesday from high school. One of them is graduating, and they're in different grade levels and have been in different schools since forever. But it's the coming graduation for the past few months has made me feel like there's this big switch that's about to happen. But the fact that it's right here makes me realize there's no switch. I'm still going to be parenting. I'm going to be a dad forever.
Yeah.
Like, there's always going to be advice. There's always going to be stuff to work out. There's always going to be difficulties.
I think that's a good thing. I would be really sad if it was ever cut off. I mean, it's so much of my identity is like tied up in who they are, and so much of my relationship with my wife is so much about us parenting these kids together and stuff like that. And
that problem solving.
It's but it's I think it's glorious. Like, I really, like, I'm into it in a way that I feel like our generation, and we're roughly the same age, our generation really took to it in a way that my father's generation did not.
No, so my dad was the first. My parents did the first Lamaze, were the first Lamaze class in their small town in Northeast Tennessee.
Well, there you go.
Because that was the only way my dad could be in the delivery room when I was born.
That's amazing.
My mom was a pariah on the birth ward at Columbia Presbyterian in New York in '67 when I was born, because she was the only person breastfeeding.
Oh, right.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there was no breastfeeding.
You didn't
for
do
us.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a shot, so it wasn't a problem.
No, my mom was my
my
grandfather was fairly radical. They excuse me, I didn't mean to hit the microphone, but
Good that you're bringing out the amateur hour stuff with Romans here.
I know my mom watches the podcast. Her complaint, and I know this mom, is that my face is hidden by the microphone, so I actually raise my head up here so my mom can see me.
There you go. But yeah, so like there's a level of involvement. Like, the thing that annoys me more than anything else, especially when my daughter was really little, was when I was walking around and I was out with her by myself, which happened at least once or twice a week. I mean, my work schedule was much worse back then than it is now because of tested stuff. Sorry, Adam. But
You monster.
I mean, giving me trading my money for time. I mean, what a horrible disaster that was. But no, we would tromp around and people like, oh, it's so nice that you're taking your daughter out.
That's silliness.
I mean, it's anyway. So that stuff is it's the most fun thing I've ever done, probably.
Agreed.
Like, we learned she wanted to work on riding her 2-wheeler. She's been riding a training wheel bike for like 2.5 years, 2 years. And so she practiced in the backyard on the patio for 2 weeks and got to the point that she could glide and take off and all that. And we went to a parking lot around the corner from the house, and like 3 times later she rides 50 or 60 feet, and the whole time she's screaming, "I can ride my bike all by myself!"
Wow, that's
and
awesome.
ringing the bell at the same time.
Amazing.
So yeah, it was like that. Like there's nothing better than that.
No.
Yeah, and on that note,
I think that's a reasonable place to stop. Child rearing is both a mystifying ordeal, and a most delightful and deeply pleasurable thing.
I have
I've
one
ever
more
done.
question.
Yeah.
Do you do road trips, Roman? Do you go on road trips with with
with
the family?
my family?
Yeah.
No, I mean, one of the side effects of the job
50 weeks a year.
it's just like it doesn't. I travel for work a bit. We took them to one of the great things that happened that happens more recently is I'm invited to do things, and if I'm invited to do something in Europe, there's a little bit more of a culture there of like, maybe they don't really pay you, but they'll bring the whole family.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I was asked to speak in Sweden, and I brought the kids, and we were on Gotland on the island, and
That's awesome.
it was really amazing.
Oh, that's super cool.
And so like we've done those types of trips before, or we've done that one. We went to Gotland and Scotland.
Yeah.
And but I was never a road trip person like as a kid. I mean, I didn't enjoy them, and so I'm not super into them now.
See, we were totally a road trip family, and
You
we would
guys were
stop.
like
we would
Swiss Family Robinson with that shit.
twice a year we
build
would
a
pilot the
treehouse
car.
at every stop.
Yeah, I mean, when the sea serpent came out, that was always the turning point of every vacation.
Get a match. It's a slee stack.
But no, we would go and we would do like multi-city trips, and we would drive from like Northeast Tennessee to Detroit or to Missouri or St. Louis or Florida or Georgia or Louisiana.
But
New
just to
Orleans or
see it,
something.
or was it people to see?
So Dad, my family business, Dad those would be his sales trips for the year, his big sales trips, and he would go take the car during the day and drop my mom and my sister and I off at a museum or at one of a place that would be featured on your podcast or Atlas Obscura
Right.
or one of the Henry Clay's house.
It's the most haunted insane asylum in Kentucky.
Yeah, or these were the hot springs in Arkansas where FDR came to recover from whatever malady he had on one particular year.
Syphilis.
I think he had polio. But
Gout.
yeah, so it was like that stuff was really formative for me, and it was the place where I both learned to love like weird. Like everybody loves the American Natural History Museum in New York because it's incredible, but going to like the Oxnard County Museum,
in the mystery shacks of the world.
exactly, and like finding a way to enjoy and love and take kind of squeeze the meat out of those places.
Well, when the boys
was
were
important.
When the boys were 12, my wife was like, "We got to go on a big road trip before they're assholes. Let's get them in the car." And we rented a big dumb SUV and drove from San Francisco to Whistler and back over 12 days, and that was fantastic. We took the dogs. It was really, really fun. And then last summer, my two boys and I drove cross country. We spent again 12 days driving cross country and then flew back, and that was also really, really like deeply awesome moment. And I realized like life is full of these artificial chapter headings like birthdays and stuff,
Right.
but taking a moment at the end of a summer before a new school to drive cross country is a real chapter heading. That is like you don't forget that.
Yeah. No, you
It feels you never know what they're going to take, so it's nice to be generative of a memory will be significant.
One of my cousins says that like a lot of our job is to generate memories that are going to turn them into good people, right? And that I think that stuff helps.
Yeah,
going to Sweden definitely okay.
Sweden.
I think that'll do it. I think that's it. Now after one false stop, Roman, where can people find you?
You can find the show at 99pi.org, or you can just look for it on a podcast player of your choice.
It's near
Just
the top
looking
of the
for
list.
It's
usually.
regularly near the
99%.
top of most lists, and it's an honor to have you here
It's-
in
it's
our
so much.
studio,
Honor to-
Roman.
It's an honor to be here. I'm very happy you asked. Thank you so much.
We'll have to have you back sometime. This has been a lot of
I would
fun, and
love it.
Norm's going to be really bummed that he wasn't here when you came by. So.
In your face, Chan.
Well, right now on the site, the Saturn V Lego build's up. You can check that out.
That was a lot of fun. We did it in a record time.
I can't believe that we missed that it was 1,969 pieces. So I don't know if you've seen it, but
amazing.
Lego, the Ideas program, they did a kit of the Saturn V, and
wow.
It's
well,
nearly
we can
a
show you
meter.
next door.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
it's giant.
Yeah, it's huge. It has the LEM and the command module nest, and they go in the right places. All the stages come apart. It's astounding.
We built it in,
a couple hours.
yeah.
Wow.
We
Three of
did
us.
really fast.
Divide and conquer.
Nice
But,
work.
It was really fun.
And I'm sure there's other great stuff on the site.
There
but
is other
I
great
don't
stuff
work
on the
here
site,
anymore, so.
and we will see you guys next week. I think next week we'll be podcasting from Europe.
What? I'm going to Europe.
You're not going to Europe.
What? What?
So cruel. You monster.
One lousy Europe trip. That's all I wanted. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Once again, we'd like to thank the sponsor of this week's episode of Still Untitled, and that is Rackspace. Rackspace support for Amazon Web Services offers tooling and automation for account management, security, and best practices. Control your costs and relax knowing Rackspace will monitor your AWS 24/7. Learn more at rackspace.com/yourcloud. See you next week.